Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the Orvis Fly Fishing 101 class. My name is Drew, and this is Abby, and we'll be your instructors for the day. We're really happy you're here with us, as this is the first step on learning more about this great sport.
And we realize that this can be an intimidating sport to get into. We're here to walk you through each step, whether that's equipment, technique, or which rock to stand on.
Today is all about going over the basics. The first half of the class will cover casting. The second half of the class will talk about equipment, rigging, knots, and flies that you need to get started.
We will also highlight some additional resources for you as you begin your journey into fly fishing. Feel free to pause throughout the video to try some things out for yourself.
There are many common themes that draw people to the sport of fly fishing. For me personally, it was about taking on a small challenge. It was about getting outdoors and connecting to nature. We also hear from folks that tell us they've avoided getting into fly fishing for many misconceptions. First and foremost being that it can be expensive. Second, that you have to go to exotic destinations to chase trout. And third, that it's overly complicated.
We're going to go over 3 things today: the basics of fly casting, the equipment you'll need, and how to rig up your rod to go catch a fish.
And the best part is we're going to make it fun, easy, and accessible. The basic equipment needed to get started in fly fishing is pretty simple. You have a 9-foot 5-weight rod, reel, and line outfit. You have a loaded lanyard, a sling pack, and 6 key fly patterns. When I got started in fly fishing, I relied on library books and a couple lessons from some family members. If I had a store like this and a set of classes, I think things would have gone a lot smoother.
And with Orvis guidance through our store, our Orvis Learning Center, adventures, and through our schools, we're here to help you through it. Let's get started.
So most fly rods come in 4 pieces, and essentially this is for ease of travel. We'll begin with the butt section and take our next largest section. All Orvis fly rods come with an indicator dot that allow you to align each section properly. In order to seat the ferrules of the fly rod, we'll go ahead and insert the 2 parts together, align the dots 180 degrees apart, firmly press and twist into place. We've got our 2 largest sections together. We'll put that down and we'll begin with the delicate tip sections using the same process. I'll take my alignment dots, put them together at 180 degrees apart, firmly seat them, and turn them into place. Now that we've got our 2 sections together, we can go ahead and assemble the entire rod. You may notice that a fly rod is much longer than a conventional rod. This allows us to bend and flex the rod when we cast, but also gives us an advantage when we fight a fish. For much of fly fishing, the reel is simply a device to hold the line, and you otherwise manipulate the line with your hand. Sometimes when you hook a big fish, the drag takes over. When you tighten it down, it offers more resistance. When you loosen it up, it offers less resistance against the fish. The next step is to mount our fly reel onto the butt section of our fly rod. This is the butt section of the fly rod. This is our fly reel. You'll notice that there is a reel foot on the fly reel. We'll take that reel foot, slide it up underneath the cork, hold it into place, take the reel band, push that into place, and then tighten everything down. We know we've got a secure fit when we can take the rod, wiggle it, and make sure that there's no play in the reel. You'll notice this reel is preloaded with an orange backing and a yellow fly line. Sometimes the end of the fly line is difficult to find on the spool. The best way to do that is to take the spool off, give it a shake, the line will slide off. We'll want to make sure we put the spool back on with the line exiting underneath the bridge of the reel. Now we can pull line off and rig up our rod. What I'm demonstrating now is stripping line off of the reel. A typical fly line is 90 to 100 feet long. What happens when we catch a fish that runs further than 90 to 100 feet away from us? We've got a bright orange backing that acts as a backup. One thing you'll notice about a fly line is that it's got a smooth PVC exterior. But also as you slide it through your fingers, it tapers up in diameter. It starts out nice and thin and then gets nice and thick. The first 30 feet of the fly line is where all the weight is centered. This is called the weight forward part of the fly line. This is what helps the fly rod cast. As you get further back in the fly line, it tapers down in diameter. This is called the running line. One of the great aspects to fly fishing is the cast. It's what identifies the sport, and for some, what keeps them from participating in it.
The perception is that it is very difficult. We are here today to show you that it is not difficult and is actually simple and fun.
Before we get started in fly casting, we need to line up our rod, and let me show you a quick and easy way to do that. We'll begin by stripping 20 feet of line off of the reel. I'm going to take the line and I'm going to double it in half. By doubling it in half, it's going to increase the surface area that I have to hold onto. It's also going to create a larger loop for me to pass it through the guides. What we want to do is make sure that we protect the bottom of our reel and the reel seat itself. So when we put the rod down, we want to make sure we put it down in some soft grass, or you can actually use your hat to cushion the bottom of the reel. I'm going to take that doubled over line, I'm going to pass it up through our first guide, being careful that I hit each guide moving on up the rod. And as I move up the rod, you'll notice that I'm leaning the rod down as I go. I'm not bending the rod. If I bend the rod, we could potentially break it. By leaning the rod down to eye height, we're going to keep it nice and safe. Another benefit of doubling the line in half is if I do happen to let go of it, it just falls and the loop opens up. I don't have to worry about the line crashing all the way down to the bottom and starting over again. So I can take that doubled over loop, making sure I hit each and every guide as I go, leaning the rod down to eye level. I can pull the remaining line through, and we're ready to start casting. Before we teach you how to cast a fly rod, we're going to show you how a conventional tackle spinning rod is cast. The major difference is that the spinning rod uses the weight of the lure to bend or flex the rod. With a fly rod, we use the weight of the fly line. This is how a spinning rod is cast. So we just saw how a spinning rod is cast utilizing the heavy weight of the lure. The main difference between casting a spinning rod and a fly rod is that the flies we use are typically almost weightless. So we rely on the very thick fly line, which actually has a physical weight to bend or flex the fly rod. Just like a spinning cast, we're going to start the rod and stop the rod, except we're using the physical weight of the fly line to bend or flex the rod.
For those of you who are familiar with golf and know the importance of grip, holding a fly rod is no different. Many anglers like to hold a fly rod like they're holding a snake around the neck, but really, try and think of it more of holding a bird in the hand. Put your thumb right on top and let that thumb act as a rudder to guide your cast. For those of you who are right-handed, you will have a position that looks like this. Your right foot should be slightly behind your left, and it would be the opposite if you were left-handed. This position allows for you to have better range of motion, a comfortable position, and allows you to see that back cast and forward cast as you're fishing. Watching your back cast and forward cast is a great practice to have while fly casting. There are two major components that you'll need to know to cast a fly rod. You'll want to move the rod and stop the rod. Move the rod, stop the rod. Move the rod, stop the rod. Move the rod, stop the rod.
Next, let's demonstrate the basic pick up and lay down. We'll start by gripping the line between our index finger and the cork. We'll extend 25 feet of line out the tip of the rod and start with the rod tip down around waist level. Remember Abby's demonstration of move the rod and stop the rod? We'll use that here. Move the rod back to a hard stop, allowing that line to drop down behind us on the grass. Move the rod forward to a hard stop, allowing the line to drop down in front of us. Move the rod, stop the rod. Move the rod, stop the rod. Move the rod, stop the rod. Let's put those together. That was the forward cast and the back cast. Move, stop, move, stop. Move, stop, move, stop. Move, stop, move, stop. Now it's time to get our line hand involved. up until this point, we've pinched the line between the index fingers of our casting hand and the cork. But now we're going to take the line between a thumb and index finger of our non-casting hand and hold it while we get the rod moving. What we want to do is have our elbows down at our side, nice and relaxed, pinching that line between our thumb and index finger, holding it in place as we cast. One thing to avoid when getting the line hand involved is what we call the baseball batter's motion. We don't want to bring that line hand back with us while we're casting, because what that does is eliminates the tension we're creating by keeping that line hand out in front of us and holding the line. When we move the rod and stop the rod, move the rod and stop the rod, we feel the tension on the forward cast, and that's our cue to let the line go, shooting line, allowing us to extend our cast further out and to reach greater distances. You're doing a great job. I'm sure already you've noticed this is a lot easier than it seems. Take your time to incorporate your line hand into your casting. You'll cast further and cast more efficiently.
False casting is a critical part of fly fishing. It's when the fly is in the air and not touching the water. False casting can be used for 3 different reasons. The first, to dry off your fly. When you're using a dry fly, you want to keep that fly nice and dry. Sometimes it can get waterlogged. By false casting, you're giving that fly an opportunity to dry off. You may also want to use false casting to change directions. If from here I want to change directions to over there, I can't do that easily. I want to false cast until I can make that cast happen.
Now let's take a moment to focus on the third reason why we false cast, and that's to get the belly or weight of the fly line out the tip of the rod so that we can shoot the running portion of the fly line. If you notice, the belly of the fly line is much thicker than the very thin running portion of the fly line. So when we false cast, using our line hand to hold the rod out, what we're doing is allowing the line to slip through our fingers, getting that 30 feet of fly line out the tip of the rod so that we can then shoot this very thin running section of the fly line forward, extending the distance or reach of our cast.
With 25 to 30 feet of line past the tip of your rod, strip line from your reel to the ground. With the line in your line hand, start your cast. On the forward cast where your line comes to a stop, let that line feather through your fingers on your line hand. At that point, lower your rod tip to the ground, and now you're in the fishing position. Everything besides casting is done in that fishing position, whether it's stripping line or fighting that fish.
Got it, you ate it. Now let's talk about an actual fish fighting scenario. We're at our local pond. We've got our little guppy bluegill hanging out over there in the shallows. We're gonna use our basic pickup and laydown, false casting, and shooting line to present our fly to that bluegill. Here we go. I'm gonna make a couple false casts. The line is in my line hand. I'm gonna shoot that line to the bluegill. It takes the fly. I'm gonna set the hook, just coming tight, and then I'm gonna strip in line. You'll notice that this bluegill isn't quite big enough to fight it on the reel, so I'm using my index finger, pinching the line against the cork, stripping in line to fight this fish. As it comes in, I'm gonna unhook it, snap a photo, let it go so we can catch the next one. So now let's talk about a very different fish fighting scenario. Imagine, if you will, we're on the ocean. We're on the front of a flat skiff and we've got tarpon 30 feet out in front of us. We're gonna utilize all the techniques we've just gone over. The basic pick up and lay down. Using our line hand to hold the line. The false cast, shooting, delivering the fly to our tarpon, setting the hook with a strip set, coming back, and allowing that fish to take line off of the reel. Look at that thing go. Woo! Look at that jump. All right, the backing has just left the reel, heading out the tip of the rod. Once the fish comes to the stop, we can begin to recollect this line back on the reel. Applying side pressure, rod tip is down to the side. Utilizing the butt section of the rod to apply force. Once we've got the line back onto the reel and that fish makes a run towards us, we can go ahead and strip line as opposed to actually using the reel. If the fish goes and makes another run, we're gonna allow that line to slide through our hands, recollect it back on the reel, and begin to fight the fish on the reel. Now we're gonna show you a great way to practice your casting at home. By spending time practicing at home, it's gonna make your experience at the pond or on the stream go a lot more smoothly. We'll be using a cardboard bass with a piece of Velcro on it and a piece of Velcro attached to the end of our fly line, but you can use a hula hoop or a dinner plate to do the same thing at home. I'm gonna place a piece of Velcro on the end of Abby's leader, and she's gonna utilize the 3 techniques we just went over: the basic pick up and lay down, false casting, and shooting line to practice her accuracy as she tries to catch this largemouth bass. Welcome back. What do you think?
Not too bad, right?
You can do this. Let us continue with the rigging portion of the class so we can get you on the water today. We'll begin the class by covering the components necessary to get started in fly fishing, as well as how to set them up.
Then we'll cover 2 knots that are essential to fly fishing, as well as flies and fly selection.
The class will conclude with ways to rig your fly rod for an effective day on the water. Just like in conventional tackle, you need a rod, reel, and line to get the job done. It's no different in fly fishing, and we've got everything you need to get started. You'll notice I'm using a Clearwater outfit. On the end of all of our rod tubes, we have a descriptor that tells you exactly what's inside. This is a 9-foot rod for a 5-weight line. Orvis does a great job at putting together rod, reel, and line packages in every weight and length. But a 9-foot 5-weight is a great place to get started, as it'll accomplish about 90% of everything you need to do. We'll begin with the butt section and take our next largest section. We'll go ahead and insert the 2 parts together, align the dots 180 degrees apart, firmly press and twist into place. We'll put that down and we'll begin with the delicate tip sections. I'll take my alignment dots, put them together at 180 degrees apart, firmly seat them, and turn them into place. Now that we've got our 2 sections together, we can go ahead and assemble the entire rod. The next step is to mount our fly reel onto the butt section of our fly rod. We'll take that reel foot, slide it up underneath the cork, hold it into place, take the reel band, push that into place, and then tighten everything down. As we continue the process to rig up our rod, we're stripping 20 feet of line off of the reel. We'll take that line and we'll double it in half. We'll take our rod, reel, and line and place it down on the ground, take our doubled over line and begin to slide it up through the guides. Once we get up to the tip top, we can go ahead and pull all the line through the guides, and we've successfully lined up our rod. The difference between casting a conventional spinning rod and a fly rod is that the fly rod uses the weight of the fly line to bend or flex it, whereas a conventional spinning rod uses the weight of the lure to bend or flex the rod. Each fly rod is designed for a specific weight line. For example, this is a 5-weight rod that matches up with a 5-weight line. At this point, we're ready to connect our leader to our fly line. Leaders come in a nice paper pack. We can go ahead and take the leader out of the package, and you can see that it's nicely coiled. We're going to take the leader and put it between our 3 fingers and begin with the knotted end of the leader and working it out and around the coil Typically, it's wrapped around about 6 times. There it goes twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and we can unwrap the leader. We have our nice welded loop of our fly line. We'll take the knotted end of the leader, place it over top of the welded loop of the fly line, loop the leader in half, bring it through the loop of the fly line, pull the whole thing through, and we've got a nice loop-to-loop connection. If you ever forget those steps, it's written out with some nice diagrams on the back of the pack of your Orvis leader.
Welcome to the knot portion of the class. There's often a common misconception that you have to know a lot of knots in fly fishing, but that's really not the case. I'm here to tell you that there's only 2 knots you really need to know. 1, the clinch knot. 2, the double surgeon's knot. We'll go over those right now. Let's start with our clinch knot. The clinch knot is used to tie your fly to your leader. So start with your fly in one hand and your leader in the other. From there, feed your leader through the eye of the hook. It should look something like this. Hold your tag end, or the shorter end, and wrap it 7 times around the leader. Once you're there, it should look like this. Take your tag end, that shorter piece, and stick it back through the loop near the eye of the hook. Do not pull on that tag end because that will mess up your knot. Pull slightly on the leader and hold your hook in one hand and tighten. Snip your tag end and you're ready to fish. Over time, our leader can become a little bit shorter. When that happens, we like to tie a little piece of tippet on the end to make it last a little bit longer. By doing that, we're going to tie a double surgeon's knot. Hold your leader in one hand and your tippet in the other. Make them overlap, I like to think about 5 inches. From there, loop them together, right over left like this. Run that tag end through the loop twice. It should look like this. For at this point, hold both tag ends in both hands and tighten. And the same as the clinch, those tag ends you can clip right off. Make sure you're clipping the right ones, and you're ready to fish. Don't get frustrated if you can't get these right away. These do take practice. Additional videos and animations are always available at our Orvis Learning Center.
Welcome to the fly selection portion of Fly Fishing 101. Often, one of the more confusing aspects of getting into the sport can be picking out the right fly for the right situation. The good news is that we can distill down fly selection to 6 core fly patterns. Fish eat lots of different things, and the good news is there's a fly pattern to represent all of them. This is a pheasant tail nymph. If you've ever picked up a rock off the bottom of a creek or river and seen little critters scurrying around, those are juvenile insects. This one happens to represent a young mayfly. The pheasant tail is dark in color. This one has a gold bead on the front of it to help it sink. And typically, we fish these subsurface underneath an indicator to get it down where the trout are.
Got him, got him, got him, got him.
The next fly pattern we'll talk about is the hare's ear. This is also a nymph. It represents a juvenile mayfly, just like the pheasant tail. The hare's ear just happens to be a lighter color than the pheasant tail. These are found down near the river bottom. And you can think of a river kind of like a conveyor belt for trout. The trout will sit motionless in the current, and the current will bring that food right to them. Typically, we'll fish the hare's ear just like a pheasant tail. It's got a little bead to help weight it. We'll fish it down near the bottom, underneath an indicator where the trout live. The next fly pattern I want to tell you about is the parachute Adams. This is a dry fly. It's tied to represent the adult life cycle of a mayfly. If the nymph lives down at the bottom underneath rocks, the adult mayfly rises to the surface and eventually flies away. If you've ever seen a trout break the surface of the water to feed, it's feeding on a dry fly. We'll use the floatant on our lanyard to treat our dry fly to help it float a little bit longer. The next fly pattern I want to tell you about is the elk hair caddis, and this continues on the theme of dry flies. It's designed to float on the surface of the water. If you've ever seen a tan-colored moth-like insect flying around a trout stream or a pond, it's probably a caddis. And just like the parachute Adams, we'll use the floatant on our lanyard to treat this dry fly to help it float longer. Dry flies come in a variety of shapes, sizes, and colors. If you ever need help picking out the right dry fly for the right situation, we have an associate at any of our retail locations that can help you pick out the right fly for the right situation. Dry fly fishing is often one of the most romanticized aspects of the sport. If you've ever seen Brad Pitt in A River Runs Through It, standing on that rock, that's dry fly fishing at its finest. The next classification of fly I want to tell you about are streamers. And this one in particular is the woolly bugger. If I only had one fly to fish for the rest of my life, this would be it. It can represent everything from a leech to a crayfish to a small baitfish pattern, and can catch anything from trout to bass to even saltwater fish. It's a super versatile pattern, and every angler should have a few in their fly box. The final fly we'll talk about today is the clouser minnow. And just like the woolly bugger, it's also a streamer. This is a fly we're going to cast out and retrieve back to ourselves, and is most often used to imitate a small bait fish. The cool thing about the clouser minnow is that it's got little bead chain or dumbbell eyes tied on the top of the hook so that it actually rides hook point up in the water. This means that it's going to get snagged on the bottom less, but also give you more positive hookups. The cool thing about the clouser minnow is that it can be used in saltwater or freshwater, can catch everything from trout, bass, to bonefish, and even tarpon. The clouser minnow, just like the woolly bugger, is an incredibly versatile and important fly pattern for any angler's fly box. This concludes the fly selection portion of the class. With these 6 key core fly patterns, you can catch fish anywhere, anytime. We started with the pheasant tail and the hare's ear nymph. We moved on to our dry flies, the parachute Adams and the elk hair caddis, and we finished up with the woolly bugger and the clouser minnow. We have associates at any Orvis retail store that can help you pick the right fly for the right situation. We also have a lot more information at the Orvis Learning Center.
Now that we've talked about the 6 key fly patterns to get started in fly fishing, let's rig our rod up to show you how to fish each one of those patterns.
We'll start with a dry fly. We learned earlier in the class how to attach our leader to our fly line with a loop-to-loop connection. And down at the long end of our leader, we'll tie on our dry fly with a clinch knot. Once we've got our dry fly on, we're ready to go fishing. We'll cast it out and hope for a fish to rise up and eat it off the surface. So we've just learned how to rig our dry fly at the end of our leader with a clinch knot. Now we're going to add to it. I've taken about 18 inches of tippet off of the spool and trimmed it with the nippers on my lanyard. I've taken that piece of tippet and tied it on to the back of the hook shank of my dry fly with a clinch knot, and then added a nymph down at the bottom. This rig is called a dry dropper. The dry fly acts as an indicator to let us know that a fish has eaten the nymph below the surface of the water.
Let's talk about how to set up an indicator rig. An indicator rig is used to fish a nymph at the bottom of the water column.
You start by attaching your leader with the loop-to-loop connection we learned earlier. You'll come on down to the end of the leader and tie on your fly using the clinch knot. About 12 inches up the fly, we'll add a small piece of split shot. The weight of the fly and the little piece of split shot helps us fish it down near the bottom, and the indicator lets us know when a fish eats it.
Now we'll talk about my favorite way to fish, which is with a streamer. You attach your leader to your fly line using that loop-to-loop connection that we talked about earlier.
Come on down to the end of your leader, attach the streamer with a clinch knot, and remember, the streamer can be thought of a lot like a lure in fly fishing. You cast this thing out, retrieve it back to you, and away you go. It's as simple as that.
For more information about how to rig up a rod for the type of fishing you'd like to do, just talk to one of our friendly associates at our Orvis retail store.
Or you can head online and check out the Orvis Learning Center. Remember, fly fishing doesn't have to be an expensive sport. You can take your few pieces of essential gear, head to your local pond, and get fishing today. Orvis offers 3 great rod, reel, and line outfits in a good, better, and best model. Starting with our best, we have the Helios 3, Mirage USA, and Pro Flyline outfit. At our better category, we've got our Recon outfit with our brand new Hydros reel and Hydros line. And finally, we've got our good outfit, the Clearwater. It's our best performance to value outfit that allows you to get fishing today without a large investment. Throughout the course of the class, you saw me utilize the loaded lanyard. We've got floating to help our dry flies float on the surface of the water. I used the nippers to cut my tippet. I pulled tippet from the 3 included spools. I docked flies on the included fly patch. And you can use the forceps to remove a fly from a trout's mouth or simply steady a hook as you tie on your leader. The loaded lanyard is a great piece of grab-and-go equipment essential to getting started in fly fishing. Finally, throughout the class, we talked about some of the essential terminal tackle needed to get started in fly fishing. We talked about leaders, indicators, split shot, and the 6 essential fly patterns that you can use to get started in fly fishing today. The next piece of essential gear you've seen me use throughout the class is the guide sling. A sling helps you carry all of your gear throughout the course of a day of fishing. It allows you to pack all of your fly boxes, leaders, extra tippet, even a rain jacket, and maybe a lunch. The sling fits comfortably on your shoulder, slides around for easy access, and then you can get it out of the way when you start your fishing.
So who's ready to go fishing?
At Orvis, we're here for you. Head on over to orvis.com and find your local retail store. There, a fishing manager or associate can help you get set up with all the information and gear to fish today.
Also head on over to the Orvis Learning Center at howtoflyfish.orvis.com. There you can find videos, podcasts, animations about all things fly fishing.
Also at orvis.com, you'll find our adventures page, where we've got 1 and 2 day schools, specialty schools, trips, as well as awesome adventure opportunities.
It is our hope that you continue your journey with us through all of these opportunities on the water.
Thank you again for joining us for the Orvis Fly Fishing 101 class. We can't wait to work with you soon. Congratulations and good luck on the water.